KTIB in my book stands for Keep Thibodeau in Broadcasting. In the early 1950s, the first steps in getting a radio station for Thibodeau and the surrounding area were walked by local businessman Ferd Block, who would eventually partner with Ed Jackson and Sam Larson to form Delta Broadcasting. Acquiring a coveted AM radio license was a bit difficult because of a then FCC rule, where if an existing radio station, in this case AM 1490 in Houma, had under a certain population count based on the station's output, then they could prevent another station from moving into that coverage area. By December of 1951, the determination of Delta Broadcasting paid off, and the group was granted an FCC license. After some 2 years of planning and building, the finished product came to life on December 24th of 1953 at 10 a.m. when KTIB went on the air for the first time. The station was located on West 5th Street, just off Jackson Street, on the second floor of the Lafourche Comet newspaper building, which was later called the Daily Comet. It had an output of 500 watts, broadcasted daily from 6 a.m. to sunset, and was located at 630 on the AM dial. The output was later upgraded to 1,000 watts. The tower location was just off the Schriever Highway, Highway 20, near 3185. For most of the 1950s and 60s, KTIB's format was mainly local news and information, which included book reviews and sports recaps, plus music ranging from gospel, hillbilly, Cajun, rock and roll, easy listening, and popular songs of a lighter beat. The most familiar DJ at the time was Leroy Martin, who worked at KTIB from New Year's Eve of 1953, just a week after the station went on the air, through 1983 and primarily on weekends. The station's first general manager was Arthur Bachman. He would be part of KTIB for its first few months before moving to another radio station in Morgan City. He was replaced by Alfred Benzabat, a 27-year-old radio administrator with experience in Memphis, Tennessee, who eventually brought with him a young lady with limited radio experience who was also his children's babysitter, named Marie Servino, who would eventually marry a man from Thibodeau and became Marie Bergeron. She would go on to work in local radio for over 4 decades. Mr. Benzabat, whose on-air name was Hal Benson, would sadly pass away in 1955 at the age of 29 while cutting his grass at home. He was briefly followed at KTIB by Don Gatz, who would move on to California, and shortly afterwards, KTIB would hire Houma native Raymond Sadie as general manager. He previously worked behind the scenes at a Lake Charles TV station. Sadie continued the station's variety of news, information, and music, which was further enhanced in 1962 with the hire of Roy Vicknair, who served as a well-respected news anchor and knowledgeable music historian. One of the station's slogans in those days was Voice of the Golden Delta. One of the station's long-running programs was the Sensational Southern Tones, a gospel group which performed every Sunday from the 1950s into the 1990s, featuring many prayer and song requests by countless devoted listeners. In 1960, KTIB Studios moved to the corner of Canal Boulevard and West 3rd Street into the First Federal Bank building, which later became the Lafourche Parish Sheriff's Office Administration Building. In March of 1966, KTIB added an FM station at 106.3 of 3,000 watts of output to serve as a simulcast station which would broadcast at night and usually would stay on the air through midnight. Around the end of 1966, Raymond Sadie left his general manager position at KTIB to start his own radio station based in Houma. It would be called KHOM 104.1 and was on the air by 1968, and it broadcasted at a maximum allowed output of 100,000 watts. The maximum on AM would be 50,000 watts. Marie Bergeron and Roy Vicknair would eventually follow him to the new station. Sadie also had 2 business partners in the radio station in beer distributor Jimmy Buquet and attorney Kenneth Watkins, to which their corporation was known as Laterre Broadcasting. The station emphasized easy listening music along with hourly news updates from 6 a.m. through 11 p.m. weekdays. Sadie built his initial audience by talking to Terrebonne Parish teachers who were on strike at the time and promised them that the station would cover their side of the story every day until the strike ended. As a result of Sadie leaving KTIB, the station found a new general manager in Hugh Smith, who also had an engineering background. Smith emphasized modern rock and roll, with some exceptions, and rebranded the station with emphasis on the FM signal as the Big Ten 6 or the Big Ten 630, covering the University Circle. In 1967, Smith oversaw the station moving to its long-term home on Green Street in the Young Men's Business Club building on the second floor. In 1973, KTIB was sold to Laterre Broadcasting. At that time, the FCC would only allow an ownership group to possess no more than 2 radio stations in one market. As a result, Laterre promptly sold 106.3 FM to Joe Costello of New Orleans, the owner of WRNO FM, and renamed it KXOR FM, with the office moved to Ridgefield Road in Thibodaux. When the sale of ownership was completed, KTIB became a country music station, playing the best of country's present and past. Many of Laterre's employees would spend time at both KTIB and KHOM. One of those familiar names, who was heard throughout the 1970s into the 1990s, was Les Domain, who hosted the KTIB Swap Shop program at 10 a.m. weekdays as a way for people to find ways of selling and buying everyday household items and equipment. By 1986, KTIB took a huge jump in wattage by going from 1,000 to 5,000 watts daytime and 1,000 at night, and moved to 640 a.m. on the dial. The tower site also moved to near the Lafourche-Assumption Parish border, just off of Highway 308. In 1989, the format changed to easy listening under the slogan, "The Music of Your Life," primarily songs from the 1940s into the 60s, and KHOM's format went to the oldies, which was rock and roll from the 1950s through the mid-70s. In 1995, KHOM changed formats to Mix 104.1, which was adult contemporary, and KTIB became Good Times and Great Oldies. On November the 6th of 1996, KHOM was sold to Clear Channel Radio, which was later called iHeartRadio, and shortly afterwards changed call letters and moved the offices to New Orleans. By the end of 1998, Marie Bergeron announced her retirement, where she made a name for herself as host of Dialogue, KTIB's interview and public service program since 1973. Shortly afterwards, Roy Vicknair would also retire, and in 1999, Laterre sold KTIB to Delta Star Broadcasting, where it continued the oldies format mixed in with local news, talk, and sports. In 2004, the station briefly quit playing music with an all-talk format, though it would return to music and talk combination by January of 2005. The Dialogue show continued with host David Salzman from 1998 to 2001, and Jean Richard from 2001 to 2023. On May 12th of 2005 at 11:58 a.m., KTIB was turned off due to an internal ownership squabble and remained off until February of 2007, when a bankruptcy court finalized the station's sale to Gap Broadcasting of Dallas, Texas, owned by George Laughlin, a native of Metairie, Louisiana. Gap sold KTIB to Faith Broadcasting of Louisiana, owned by Dr. Joe and Katrina Chase, based out of Virginia, in late April of 2009, and it became Joy 640, featuring gospel music plus some local shows remaining. That ownership would only last until September of 2009, when it reverted back to Gap Broadcasting. The station would go under different identities in the 2010s, including The Balcony, playing a mixture of songs leaning towards an adult audience. On March 11 of 2017, KTIB would yet again add another FM simulcast station in 103.7, and on May 8th of 2017 became Lagniappe Radio, playing hot adult contemporary, including bringing in the Kid Craddock Show from 5 to 9 a.m., with Dialogue moving to 9 a.m., having previously aired at 7 a.m., and in its very early years aired at noon. KTIB would undergo a pronounced change in its programming when on April 15, 2022, owner George Laughlin agreed to lease the station to New Orleans-based Omar Romero of La Calais 97.9 FM for a period of 24 months, where KTIB-AM would carry a simulcast of his Spanish broadcast station. As a result, the Dialogue program ended on April 18th of 2022, some 49 years after it first started. KTIB-FM 103.7 was not part of the lease deal and was turned off. Here's to many great memories of KTIB as we recognize 70 years since the station first signed on, which was Christmas Eve of 1953. If you'd like to listen to some of those memories, then feel free to go to youtube.com and search KTIB-AM Memories.